Hi, Gurinder. Thank you so much for being here in New Zealand with us. Brilliant film. First question right off the bat is the film depicts well, for me, how conflict puts a lot of strain on the human rights of everyone involved.
Absolutely, yes.
Is that something that you had in mind going into creating the film?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I wanted to touch on this tumultuous event that took place 70 years ago, the partition of India, that very few people in the world know anything about. But it was the biggest forced migration in human history. 14 million people made refugees overnight. And as I said, no one knows anything about it. So I grew up under the shadow of partition. For me, Viceroy's House, my movie, is an attempt for me to shine a light on those events and to go back and interrogate the history of why certain decisions were made, in whose interest were they made, and how they affected the ordinary little people. People like my grandmother, who found herself on the wrong side of the border that was created, and with her and her 5 young children had to basically flee in the clothes that she was in, losing her baby daughter along the way to starvation. So that was what I wanted to do, explore that moment in history. And in the film you see it is the agendas of political leaders that come into conflict that are generally given importance as opposed to the impact on little people.
Interesting that you say that, because Mountbatten is an interesting character in the sense that he has such a grand title, being the Viceroy of India, though he seems to often be the pawn in other people's political agendas.
Yes.
Is this something that you knew going into it, or something you discovered?
I discovered Mountbatten has always been blamed for the division of India.
It's got his name to it.
It's got his name to it, exactly. It's called the Mountbatten Plan, in fact, the partition of India. But as we were researching and writing our script, we came across another book which was based on top secret British documents that had been withheld for 50 years. I was at a reception and I met Prince Charles, and Mountbatten was his favourite uncle. And he immediately got very animated and interested in what I was doing and asked me what my sources were, and I told him. And then he said, have you heard of this other book, and do you know these other texts? And so he then started introducing a whole bunch of material that he obviously had avidly read.
The film's tone is mournful as it is hopeful, and I guess that mirrors the partition itself. Is that something that you were trying to do going into it, or a byproduct of the context?
It was a terrible time. Many people lost their lives. It was terrible violence, and very mismanaged politically, instigated politically and mismanaged politically. But for me, as a filmmaker, I always have to find the humanity in a situation, and I always have to find hope. And part of that comes from me being a mother. You know, we just have to, as mothers, look to positive sides of stories. You know, we're so used to seeing news footage. You know, the good thing is now with the internet, you know, we do get behind the news stories. You know, and we do see the humanity and plight of people, and it does move us. You know, and I think it does affect change. I mean, when we were shooting this movie, I have a big scene with refugees. I had 1,000 extras, and these were extras who were dressed up to be period refugees, you know. But the day we started shooting that sequence was the day the little Syrian boy was found washed up on the beach. And, you know, suddenly we were like, oh my God, you know, we're depicting 70 years ago here, but that's just happening literally up the road from India, in Syria. And suddenly we just felt what we were making here was not necessarily a period film, but a film that had contemporary resonance.
What are some of the lessons that a modern audience should be taking from this story?
Well, I think that we're all much more aware of geopolitics than people were then. At that time, I think people generally trusted their leaders Now I think all of us question our leaders all the time. It's the normal to do that, whereas then it was some kind of heresy if you challenged your prime minister. You know, so in that sense, I think the film encourages you to do that more. Question the agendas of people. Why do countries go into other countries? Yeah. What is really the reason behind this? And when war or turmoil is brought to another country, you know, how is it going to affect the little people? Because that's the problem, really. People, you know, we've got so used to big, sort of powerful leaders and statistics going into other countries and doing stuff, and then when we hear about ordinary people, you know, it's getting affected by this. You know, it's good that we're hearing about it, you know, more and more, but and really what the film is saying, we shouldn't let people get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's
much easier to divide us and rule us, you know, but if we're unified, we're harder to rule.
And I do think you managed to create a uniting film, which I congratulate you for. It's as moving as it is personal, as it is expansive. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.